Okay, so now we're going to talk about some global communication trends. The primary sources that I looked at for this, and again, you can download these things for free online. The 2014 Edelman Trust Barometer is a really good one, and it has a lot of good stats in it, and you can download a PDF of a summary of that. The next one that is the WPP Burson Marsteller 2014 Global Communication Trends, and it's like a top 10 list with some like chunks of detail in it. The Holmes Report 2014 PR Trend Forecast, and there's a couple of others that I cite within the presentation. Okay, so one of the things, and this may resonate with you, that we're seeing is that we're all becoming facilitators of the conversation, whatever that conversation is. So for somebody like me, I focus on internal and employee engagement. That's what I love. I've worked in media relations before, but I really like the internal side. That's my thing, and some of you have different areas of expertise. But what we're finding, and you may be feeling this too, is that all these things are blurring because of social media. So even though I focus on internal communication, I deal a lot more with what's going on in social media because I have to, because employee conversations about my companies are taking place online. And so I have to be aware of that, and when I'm putting together communication plans, I have to be thinking about how am I reaching them here, or how am I engaging them in the workforce so that what they're saying about us is generally positive or at least honest, right? And I don't know if many of you are experiencing that, but that tends to be what a lot of people are seeing. So I partner a lot more with people on the external side now than I ever did before. One of the other trends for all of us, obviously, is maximizing mobile. Everything's going mobile. It's hard for me because I can't see on a mobile device. My eyesight's getting bad, but it is what it is. And maximizing social media effectively, maximizing the capabilities of mobile devices, delivering more personalized communication via that, where you can opt in and out of the kind of communication you want to receive from your employer, your clients, whatever it might be. And I know, like is the case, a lot of people are going to bring your own device, and that's what we do at Tenet now. So they don't give me a mobile device of their choosing. I use my iPhone if I choose to do it, and I get my work email on it, but they pay my bill every month, which is nice. So, and then it's a device that's mine. I can set up the way I want to. It's not some brand I didn't choose and thing I didn't like, and you know, a lot of companies are going that direction. A lot of what communication professionals are saying they want, and I don't think this is really that different than anything that we all wanted. They want lifelong career support, ongoing PD, certification, but that's one word, certification, accreditation, validation, whatever you want to call it. Our industry, our profession has grown to the point where we're viewed, in many cases, alongside other professions like lawyers, accountants, doctors, those kinds of things, where we didn't have that opportunity before, but because the profession's grown over time and people have seen the value of great communication and poor communication, especially because of what social media has done, people want that kind of validation that they're, you know, we're the good people, we have the right stuff, we've been certified, whatever that might be. They want access to content, which of course you can find online, but some of it's not great, so they want access to good content in whatever form that may be. They still want to have in-person meetings like we're having tonight, which is good news for those of us who like that sort of thing, but of course they want access to virtual communities of like-minded people as well. Okay, so then trends for corporate communicators. This is another one I said I cited within the study. This is from the Corporate Communication International at Baruch College, City University of New York, from a study they did last year on corporate communication practices and trends. So this is more focused on the corporate side. But I thought there were some interesting things in it. Let's see. Obviously, we all know this, we're feeling it, our profession is transforming rapidly. There's a particular emphasis on the internal side now. Even though social media is very strong, but obviously people really do realize it's not a cliche anymore that employees are brand ambassadors and employees can strongly influence people's perceptions of your organization. And so intranets, while they were losing popularity, are now gaining popularity again, but with personalization. So for the organizations that can do it, they have their own version of a Facebook. It's an intranet, but you have more personality. And I know when I went and registered at Tenet, it's not perfect, but it's more than me just being on e-Tenet. I can put in a quote, I can put in my picture, I can do, you know, here's the other things I like, here's my areas of expertise, these other things like that I would never do before. You were just in a directory somewhere. But you're seeing a lot more of that personalization. On the external side, there's a lot of emphasis on corporate citizenship and partnership, sustainability, and reputation management, which I don't think comes as a surprise to anybody. And obviously transparency being critical. with leadership internally and externally. And when we talk about the Edelman Trust Barometer, you'll see how bad leadership is still perceived in corporate America and some other areas as well. Okay, leveraging the employee ambassadors is what I was talking about before, the internal side, that more organizations now believe that brand ambassadors / employees bring strategic value to an organization and that the culture comes across from them. And the public would rather hear from people like that than from any spin we could put on something. So, and then employee commentary can hurt or support a reputation. There are, and I don't know if I have it in this study, I don't think I have it in here, but there are sites you can go to. You can do it now with Indeed, Indeed.com, and a couple of other ones where they have, Glassdoor is another one, I forget the names of the other ones, but where you can rank your employer. And sometimes you have to use your name, sometimes you don't. So, of course, if you're doing research about a potential employer or a client, you can go see what real people who worked there are saying about it. And we're all pretty smart. You can typically ferret out the ones that are fake versus the ones that are real. And it helps you make a decision about whether you want to work there. So if you really do have a cruddy culture and you're not doing anything to engage your employees, obviously they're going to go talk about you, because they can. One of the other things that's changing is that when social media was first coming into being, a lot of people would pay for the support to monitor that or to learn how to do it because they didn't know how to do it. And a lot of people are still doing that. There's some major organizations that do it really well. In fact, my former employer does it really well. They do it for other companies too. But fewer communication executives are now responsible for social media and its budget. They're actually building separate but related departments just to manage that, because in some cases it's a hybrid, somebody who's got a technical background and a communication background. And not necessarily young people who are right out of college. There are people my age who have decided to specialize in that, but they're not as common, but they exist. Fewer companies are hiring vendors to manage social media. They're bringing it back in-house because they feel like there's enough expertise in the market now to do that versus going and hiring a company to do it. So not everybody. This is not universal. These are just trends. Obviously, you guys know this. There's multiple engagement points, which makes it really challenging as a communication professional when you've got all these different channels and you have to decide which ones to use. When I was at Dell, because it was a tech company, we had people who'd go, let's use them all because we have them, which was a nightmare and made no sense. And we used to use Chatter, or we did use Chatter, which was related to Salesforce.com. And the reason we used it was because Michael Dell liked it. But the employees didn't like it. The employees weren't using it. Only a few people like Michael Dell were using it. And so we finally had to convince them, we're not going to do that. We're not going to post stuff there. What the trends reflect, and I think this is a no-brainer too, is that running communication departments sometimes feels like a never-ending political campaign now, because you feel like the spotlight's on you all the time. And it's not, but it kind of is, because at any moment something can potentially blow up because somebody went out and posted something that's true or not. And that kind of environment makes transparency and engagement far more effective than control. So for the organizations that are still trying to clamp down on employee use of social media or checking your Facebook at lunch or something, they have a lot harder time with that. And then when somebody's angry, guess what? They're going to go blow it up on social media because you've tried to clamp down on it versus giving employees the tools to communicate appropriately about you online. And typically if you do that and you show you have an open environment, if somebody's angry, if they got laid off, fired, had a bad experience or whatever, they might rant. They're less likely to rant if you haven't had that kind of environment where you're just like trying to stop all that stuff, because it's really hard. It's impossible to stop it now, quite frankly. I think this is really interesting, and I won't spend a lot of time on all these, but this is not a huge source, but I thought that their stats were really interesting, and there are other places where you can find similar stuff. There's an organization called peopleclaim.com, which is an online support for dispute resolution. So it's kind of like a go-between or similar to Better Business Bureau, something like that. They gathered consumer data from all the people you see here and some others, but names that we've heard of. And I think what they said is interesting, and this should ring true with you. The power of the consumer, we all know this, that behind the search option, ratings and reviews are the second most important site feature if you sell a product or service. 75% of reviews generally are positive online. 95% of unhappy customers will return if you solve an issue quickly. And I have some great stories, which I won't tell in the interest of time, but you've probably all experienced that. I always say use your powers for good and not evil. I've had a couple of really bad experiences where I went and ranted about it on Twitter because I had a legitimate complaint. And those organizations that had good social media resolved my complaint within 24 hours, like went over and beyond to call me back and fix it. And then, of course, I went out and said something nice about them because I feel like you have to pay it back and not just leave the rant out there. You have to go back and go, hey, thanks, Macy's, you restored my faith. I still shop at Macy's or whatever. 82% of consumers considered user-generated reviews extremely valuable or valuable. And this actually relates to employees as well. So if you think about this from an engagement standpoint, if you work for an organization that sells products or services publicly and people are ranting about your products online, even if you know better, even if you know that some of those people are internet trolls, even if you know the difference between the real ones and the bad ones, it makes you feel differently about your organization. That's just reality. And so the power of the consumer, I mean, it impacts more than the people who are buying your product. It impacts the people who work there too, right? And they're the ones also posting stuff, by the way, sometimes. I won't go through all these, but obviously 90% of unhappy customers will not do business with the same company again if they don't get it resolved. The one in the middle is very telling. 86% reported they would trust a friend's recommendation over a review provided by a professional critic. When I go onto Amazon.com, I almost never read the product stats or the details. I go read the reviews first. And I look at the rating first, and then I go read. And I intentionally look for ones that are bad. If it's got high rating, I look for the ones that are bad to kind of see where are the flaws in the product. It drives my husband crazy because I don't actually read like the workings of the product. I'm like, well, everybody likes it. I'm just going to get it, right? But I've never been disappointed with that either. Consumers, we don't typically let each other down, right? So something to be said for that. Consumer ratings, are they for real? And here's some stats here. Now, the first stat at the top is about all shoppers, not just people who shop online, but people who buy in stores too. A lot of people go read the reviews online, but they still feel comfortable going to the store to, like, maybe I'm going to go to Best Buy and buy the electronic product in person because that's the way I like to do it. But a fair number question whether those reviews are real. And if you shop online a lot, as I do, being an admitted shopaholic, you begin to recognize the ones that are fake very quickly. It's like when you download an app and somebody's just trying to push their app online, they get all their friends to go rate it, and it's really a sucky app. It's the same thing with products. You can figure out which ones are fake if you do this a lot, and the Federal Trade Commission's already picked up on that. There was one company they fined $250,000 for paying fake reviews based on the sales they generated. So obviously embracing the consumer power, that reviews have impact on purchasing decisions. Reviews are inexpensive product advertisements. If you work on the external side, it's cheaper than some of the formal ads you can put together. Reviews also help search engine optimization because the more people are reviewing you, you rank higher when people are looking for products and services. And of course, one negative review can change a decision, and not only do that, but it can change employees' perceptions on the inside of how they feel about the company. We just talked about this, that most organizations feel like they're on all the time and they have to respond rapidly. Trying to cover something up or not be as truthful as they can be just inflames things now, so you just need to say it is what it is, right? Organizations that typically embrace this and say, whoops, we really screwed up, and you've seen good examples of that, typically then they win people back because people go, oh, okay. It takes the air out of the sails. It's like, okay, and if they see you do better, okay, we're cool, right? Anything that's visual speaks volumes because we're all very distracted now. I'm completely the most absent-minded person in the world. I'm distracted constantly, and yes, I like squirrels. And when I put that on there, I didn't realize it kept going. I'm like, God, that's annoying. It's like I thought it did it once and stopped. I'm like, it just keeps going.
But it works for your message.
It works for my message, which is distracting you from paying attention right now. The point is, if you look at all the social media channels now, they're visual. I used to be on StumbleUpon until they changed it, and I hate it. But StumbleUpon was a really good community. But Tumblr, Pinterest, Instagram, even Facebook, you share your family pictures and stuff. One impactful photo, as we know, like think about Life magazine, why it was so impactful for a print publication. One photo conveys volumes of information, and you may remember that image. You won't remember the story and all the words, but you'll remember the image. It's just very powerful, and that's why we're headed in that direction. So that's why infographics are more popular now. We all have short attention spans, less words, more visual, right? The more you can convey visually, very, very powerful. Most people, and there's different studies out there with different stats, but most people only truly remember about 20% of what they read. So people will say, well, I remember that book cover to cover, but what they actually remember is not that much. Things that they remember from a visual, emotional experience, they'll remember forever. They'll remember how they felt. It's very powerful. The other thing is, and I think this makes sense, some of the most powerful brands, you relate to them emotionally. So you're not communicating that your organization makes widgets. you're communicating about what those widgets do in the world, how they make a difference in the world, right? And the best brands that you see that do that really well, they always evoke an emotional response. When I worked for Texas Instruments several years ago, I had to work on how we were going to recruit engineers. Now, we had engineering students who were at Stanford and Berkeley, and guess what? They don't want to leave the West Coast. If they've never been to Texas, they probably think we still ride horses. I don't know. And it was like, how are we going to get them to Dallas to show them that Dallas is a really great place to work and the cost of living is good, et cetera, et cetera. What we had to do is not say, we're a great semiconductor company. What we had to do is say, you're the brains behind this product. Because you are. You're the brains behind this. Apple's great. Steve Jobs is a cool guy, brilliant. But if it didn't have that TI chip in it, it wouldn't run. You literally are the brains behind this. You're the brains behind the digital camera. You're the brains behind this projector. You're the brains behind the navigation system in your car. A new refrigerator, a washer, a dryer, everything. You touch those things every day. Every 10 minutes you touch a product that has a TI chip in it. That got engineers excited. If you're an engineering student, that's a powerful statement. This is what we do in the world. We don't make semiconductor chips. We help people live a better life, right? How many companies can you think of that do that well? Because that's what they communicate. They don't communicate, we make stuff. They communicate about how that makes a difference in the world. And you're seeing more and more of that because that's what people want. They don't want to know how you're screwing up the earth. They want to know how you're making it better. If you feel like you're not doing that way, the way to benefit from the trend is time to reassess your brand. And if you can't get that support, there's a ready-made, treasure trove of examples online that you can share with the people you're trying to convince about, look how they've transformed by doing these things. And you have to ask those hard questions. How do we stir emotion, create influence? Again, this doesn't work for 100% of organizations, but it works for a lot of them. Okay? Measuring return on investment, which has always been IABC's mantra. The good news and the bad news is now the leaders are paying attention. So where before we were saying, you really need to be doing this, now they really expect us to do it. The good news is, though, because we're communicating more online, there are far better ways to measure what you're doing when you are communicating online. Where before we would say, like, oh, we got 5,000 web hits. Well, now you can actually measure, how long people are staying on a page and where they're going from there. You can tell by the links they're going to. You can find their patterns. Because there's so much online commentary, you can find ready-made research on what people are saying and thinking about your organization or about your client's organization. So it's far easier to get that kind of measurement. Now, if you have trouble with that, one of the best places in an organization to get data to tie to what you're trying to accomplish is human resources. Because almost always in the case of what I do, at least, it ties back to whether people are staying employed or not. So if we are losing people because they're not engaged, that means we're not able to help our customers and our suppliers and our vendors and all that kind of stuff. And then there's a cost to hiring people and a cost to training people. Okay, the Edelman Trust, seriously download this. There's so much good stuff in this. I only just scratched the surface. Media trust, no surprise, dropped 5 points to 52% among what they call informed publics, people who pay attention more. So it wasn't very high to begin with, and then it dropped down to 52. Not-for-profits, in most cases, the most trusted institutions for the 7th year in a row. Governments experienced the largest decline in trust year over year. And then if you actually download the report, they have different industry segments so you can see what pertains to the area in which you work, but technology tends to be the most trusted. Banks and media outlets are far less trusted, like really not trusted. You can go look at the numbers, it's pretty bad. Academics and experts typically are the most trusted source of information, about 2/3. Technical experts, roughly the same. And surprisingly, remember we talked about consumer power? People like you and me, we're climbing the charts every year. Average people are more trusted in their reviews and comments about things than some technical experts. Okay? CEOs and government leaders remain at the bottom when it comes to trust. Only 25% respondents say that respondents trust that business leaders are going to correct issues. That's pretty sad. Even less than that, 20% trust leaders to tell the truth and make ethical, morally sound decisions. Very sad commentary. Governmental leaders are trusted even less. I don't know what the number is, but it's really bad. So I shouldn't laugh about it. It's pretty sad, but it is what it is. Obviously, the influence of leadership is everything. It really is. The person leading the company is typically linked to perceptions of the company overall, and the actions and behaviors of that person influence lots of other people, including shareholders, by the way, according to the study. And this is a no-brainer. So obviously leaders have to be courageous in acting decisively and being transparent and engaging with people, and encourage all the people who work with them to do the same. So I don't think there's any surprise there. And none of these should be a surprise as communicators. The last one is tough because, like I said, there's some people who will never maintain an active presence online. It's just not their thing based on their culture, experience, age, whatever. But sometimes you can convince them by showing examples of people who have done it well. So, any of that stuff sound familiar to you? I know it doesn't.
All of it.
I know it doesn't necessarily make you feel better. It's like, oh, okay, so it's real. It's really happening. All right. So that's kind of what's going on. That only scratches the surface. If you download any of those studies, you can find a lot more data.